So far, we have studied about using queries related to filtering the data, relating to grouping the data, having it sorted, as well as aggregating the data, creating aggregated outcomes, as well as a lot of queries related to joining two or multiple tables as such. But every time I was only using one select statements. But what if my query consists of two select statements which needs to be worked together, or more than two select statements which needs to be worked all together in order to generate the outcome? For that particular point of view, there is a next topic which we are going to study. The topic of discussion which we are going to have over here is nothing but subqueries. Now, you all must be knowing the meaning of a query. Now, what's a query? Query is a request for data from the databases. Now, what is a subquery? Subquery is nothing but, so what is a subquery? A query within a query is known as subquery. So that is a main point of using a subquery which we are going to learn today. Here we understood it in a very simpler terms. Let's try to understand in more detail that what is a subquery and how we are going to use it for generating the result set, which is not dependent on one query or the one query result set, and it's dependent on multiple queries to be used at once. So if I want to talk and discuss about subquery, what's a subquery? A subquery in MySQL or in general SQL. Now, why I have written MySQL? Because we are working on MySQL as a server. So, a subquery in SQL or MySQL is a query which is nested into another SQL query and embedded with select, insert, delete or update statements along with the various operators. Now, it can be used with your equals to, in, not exist, and n number of operators which are there at our end. Now, we can also nest the subquery with another subquery. A subquery can have one more subquery within it. So, they can be nested within each another. A subquery is also known as inner query. Now, what's an inner query? A query which is inside. As you can see in the image which I have brought over here, there is an inner query. There is a query within a query, and that is known as subquery. So it's nested, and the query which contains subquery is also known as outer query. So a query within which a subquery would be stored is known as outer query or the parent query. If you can see in the image which I have brought, it is being showing. The inner query executes first, gives the results to the outer query. So it is helping me to understand how does a subquery works. Now subquery works by running the inner query first, and whatever result will be generated through the inner query will be given out, and that will be used by the outer query or the parent query to generate a result set for us. And the main or outer query will be performed and it will give us the answer. Now MySQL allows us to use subquery anywhere. Now what is the meaning of anywhere? We can use it within select, we can use it with the where, we can use it in the from and at multiple places. So MySQL will help me to utilize and use this subquery at n number of positions. And one thing which you all must be remembering, that no matter which subquery we are using or where we are using the subquery, it should be enclosed within parenthesis. Now what's a parenthesis? That is, it should be enclosed within round brackets. All subquery forms and operations are supported in SQL standard will be supported in MySQL. Now what is this? All the types of subqueries, whether it be a single query or a multi-subquery or a correlated subquery, all will be supported in your MySQL. Now why this statement is coming? You all must be knowing that when we studied joins, not all types of joins were supported in MySQL. But the SQL version in MySQL supports all types of subqueries to be used over here. Now I talked a lot about the definition and the technicalities which are there related to subquery. I know that theory cannot help you to understand that what is a subquery, how the subquery is helpful for us, and how the subquery will generate a result set. We'll see a practical example for the same, and we will also solve multiple questions based on the different types of subqueries which are there. But before solving a subquery, we need to know certain rules which must be followed when a subquery is being written. The rules which are there, first is subquery should always be used within parentheses. That is, it should always be stored within the round brackets. or 2 within the parenthesis, very popularly known. If you don't store it, it will not be acting as a subquery and it will throw us a result error, which is there. It can also show us a syntax error because the syntax is not in the proper format which is supposed to be there. The second, if the main query does not have multiple columns for subquery, then subquery can only have one column in the select statement. That is, your subquery within a query will only have one column to be shown in the outcome. Your main query can have n number, but your subquery will always have one column. I'll explain all of them with a practical example. We can use comparison operators such as greater than, equals to, less than, in, any, some, and all. A multi-row operator is useful when the subquery returns more than one row. So, it depends that which kind of operator I am using when the subquery results more than one row or a single row as such for us. We cannot use order by statements. Now, this is very important that whenever a subquery is written, you cannot write order by within a subquery. It should be written in the main query, that is the outer query, but a subquery will never consist of order by statements, which is there. So as we now know subquery theoretically, as we also now know the rules to be followed in the subquery, let's try to see with an example. So here I have brought a table for you and there's a question being framed. And I'll help you to understand what does it looks, how the query would be written, what's an inner query, what's a subquery, what's a main query over here with the pen and paper logic, and then we'll understand it with respect to our code file as well as the SQL queries into your MySQL server. So, if you see the question, what is the question over here? This is a table related to employees. As you can see, there is an employee ID, name, department, location, age, number of trainings done by employee, KPIs met are greater than 80% or not, the experience of an individual as well as their salaries. Now, what's the question? Filter out those employee details who have salary greater than the average salary. Now, this is a question which I need to solve from the table which is provided to me. Now, imagine this table name is employees, which is there, and I try to solve this question over here. Now, you all must be knowing if this kind of question is coming, filter out, which means definitely I want to filter out the data. So, I can use where as well as having. So, filter out those employee details. So, I want to filter out the employee details of those employees who are having salaries greater than average salary, which means I don't want to return an aggregated data, that is the group by data. I want to return each employee details where the salary is greater than the average salary of all the employees, not related to any group. It's an individual row filtering which I wanted to do. So, I can use a where clause over here. And how I will write the query. First of all, when this kind of question comes, what people do is, they will start writing, let me change the color over here. They will start writing select star from, let's say the table name is what, employees. And I'll write what, where. The salary of the employees. Definitely I want to filter out what salaries of the employee. Salary is greater than, let's say if I do average salary. If I write the query like this, and many people have written the queries like this, what is the problem in this query? Is it going to give me the result set which is required, or it will show me error? Definitely, if you have understood the where clause, this is not an ideal way to write where clause. Why? Because where clause never use aggregated functions. That's your min, max, average, sum, count to filter out the data. Why? Because aggregated functions are never part of your where clause. So this query or the result from this query would not be generated. The response would be an error. That is invalid use of group function. You have used the group function or the aggregated function in a wrong manner. So, this is a wrong query. So, I cannot solve with this approach. Definitely, I want to solve it with the where clause, but I am not able to solve it over here. So, what I can ideally do is, I can use the query results. I can break the question in two parts and try to solve it over here. Let me clear it out. So let's read out the question again and let's see how the question would be broken into parts. Filter out those employee details who are having salary greater than the average salary. First of all, I need to know the average salary of the employee. Now, what's the average salary of the employee? If I do select average of salary from what? From employees. So this query over here is going to return the average salary. This is a simplistic query to find out what? To find out the average salary calculated or scored or achieved by the employee over here or being paid to the employee over here. Now what's the average salary? Definitely I'm not calculating it. I'm roughly saying that the average salary over here is 37,000. So the output of this query is, let's say, 37,000. Again, I said that I'm not calculating it. I'm just roughly considering that average is coming as 37,000. If you want, you can calculate, but it's not an actual table which is there at my end. So I have said 37,000 is the average salary for the employees of the data which is possibly available to me. Now, I want to find those employees who are having salaries greater than 37,000. So, how can I write the query now, the modified query over here? It would be written as select star from employees where. Now, I'll write where salary is greater than what? 37,000. So I'll write like this. So it will go to the data and it will filter out the salaries which are greater than 30,000. That is this employee, 37,000. This employee, and this. So 4 employees details are found. But this 37,000 is a static value. If there are 2 more new employees added, they will definitely have salaries with them and the average would change. But my query over here will still calculate for what? 37,000 greater than salary over here. So let's say 2 more new employees are added. Here there is 49,000 as a salary added and 60,000 as a salary added. And my average over here is now not 37,000 but changed to, let's say, 42,000. Change to, let's say, 42,000. Now, I cannot filter out the data over here where the salary is greater than 37,000. I have statically written 37,000. So, here also every time I have to manually change what? 42,000. And then it will give me result set for the same. But it becomes difficult for us to manually change n number of times when new data is being added. So what I can do, I can use a subquery in order to solve this problem. How? Let's try to see. Okay, imagine that I am writing a query over here that is select star from employees. That is a result which I need to get in the output. I want all the employee details where. Now where I am writing what? Salary. And what I want, when I am trying to equalize the value, I want the average of the salary which is generated by this query. So instead of writing a static value over here, what's a static value? A fixed value. Can I write the query instead? So I'll write greater than, and here I'll write what? Select average salary from what? Employees. Now instead of writing a static value over here in the where condition, what I have written? I have written another query, a query which gives me the average value. so that that can be used by my another query to get the result set. But the query approach over here is still wrong. If you remember the rules which we mentioned for a subquery needs to be written in a parenthesis. Now what's a subquery over here? A query within a query. Which query is a within query or inside a query? This query, where the average of salaries is calculated for the employees. So this is my within query and I have to formulate it into what? Into brackets which are there. So here you can see this is a query. Within this query, there is one more query which is being acted over here. So whenever I run this query, first my inner query will give me what? The average salary from the employees table. And that value will be used to filter out the outer query results which are there. Well, like similar to what we have done by writing two queries separately. First, I calculated the average salary and that I used for finding out the employee details. So the same thing is happening, but instead of putting a static value, my query is being written over there so that it generates the outcome every time without mentioning any static element over here. That's how subquery works. That's a simplistic example of what a subquery happens. Now, let me main this subquery, which one is subquery, which one is main query, and what actually happens when the result is generated. So, as it said, the query within a query is known as what? Subquery. So, this is known as what? A subquery, which is there. Now, subquery is also known as what? Inner query. It is also known as what? Inner query. And this is also known as an independent query. Now, what's the meaning of an independent query? This query is not dependent on anyone. If you run this query separately, this can work. Now, what does it mean? Let's say if I run this query, select average salary from employees separately, is it going to work? Yes. So, that's an independent query, my inner query and subquery over here. Now, what's this query known as? This query is known as what? An outer query for us. Also known as what? A main query. Now, what's the meaning of main query? Because this query is going to get us the result set or the outcome which is required. And this is also known as dependent query. Now, what is the meaning of a dependent query? Dependent query means the outer query is actually dependent on an inner query, so that the result of an inner query would be used to generate the outcome. That is known as what? A dependent query. Now, how does it actually works? When I am writing this query over here, first it will run the inner query. Select average salaries from employees. So, it will calculate the average salary. Let's say the average salary is 42,000 now after inserting two new employee details. And this 42,000 which is generated from the inner query will be used to filter out the data from the outer query. Now, salary greater than what? 42,000 would be filtered out and then you will get the result set. So, which is the data? This one, this one, this one and this one as well as this one. So, these 6 records are going to be shown into your outcome when this query is going to execute for us. So, this was a simplistic show, a simplistic example on how a subqueries are going to be written, on how a subquery is going to execute and how a subquery looks like when it is written into the query. Now, we will see practically that how all of them would be utilized into queries. Let's solve some questions. Let's see the types of subqueries which we have and let's try to see which subquery is ideally used a lot. So here, when I go on my screen, as you can see, subqueries are queries embedded within another SQL query. They are typically used to retrieve data that can be used in the outer query to perform operations. Subquery allows more complex data retrieval and manipulation. All the complicated logics we can write and manipulate the data and generate the outcome for the same. Now, as we saw the example, let's try to see the same example over here. Select star from what? From employees. So, I have employees table. I have companies database where there are 4 tables: departments, employees, time, projects and timesheets. So, I have data related to employees, as you can see. I want to find out the employees having greater than the average salary. As I showed you, the same way I'll show you over here, which I showed you on pen and paper. As I discussed that if I write where clause and aggregated functions directly into it, it is not going to show us the result set. Like where salary is greater than average salary. Let's say I'll write average what? Salary, which is there. When I run this query, when I execute it, can you see what it is showing me? Invalid use of group function. Why? Because you cannot use aggregated function into your where clause to filter out the result set. It is a saying of where clause that you cannot use. When I try to use having over here and run it, what it is telling me? In aggregated query without group by. So it's incomplete for us to run. So where and having could not be used. Now definitely I don't want to use aggregated record filtering. I want to filter out the data row wise. So when I want to filter out the data row wise, I need to use a where clause. So first let's find out the average salary of the employee. What's the average salary of the employee? I'll write select average of salary from what? From employees. I do this. So you can see this is an average salary which is being given by the employees. I'll right click. So I'll right click. I'll copy the row which is there. And what I will do, I'll paste it over here. Instead of average salary, I'll paste the value. What's the value? 516.667. This is the average salary which I have calculated. So the employees having greater than average salaries are found. What if I try to fill in the details of more employees over here? The average is going to change. So when the average is going to change, definitely I want this query to also not use a static value over here, but use a dynamic value over here. That is, let's say I have employees table over here and I'm changing the salary. Where let's say its job title is sales head and he belongs to department D3. I'm changing the salary. So let's say I'll write update salary set. Salary is equals to, let's say, 65,000. Over here, where the department, let me see what it is showing. Department ID as D3, job title as sales head. So where department ID is equals to D3 and here the job title which is being given is nothing but sales head over here. So when I run this query, okay, salary, it's employees. So when I run this query, it is changing, and if I see the employees table, you can see where it was sales head D3, it has changed to 65,000. Now if I check the average salary which is there, what's the average salary? 52,142. So if I want to now filter out the data greater than the average salary, definitely I cannot go with the static value. So I have to use the query which is giving me the average salary instead of inserting a static value. So here I'll copy this and paste it over here. So this is a query which is helping me to get a result set. When I run this, it is telling me that it's an SQL syntax error. Why? Because a query which is written within a query, you have to put it into parenthesis. If you remember the rules, that subquery will always be written within a parenthesis. So I have written this. So what will happen? This is my inner query. That is an independent query. So if I run this query separately, it's going to execute and give me the result sets. Just a second. Yeah. So if I run this query independently, it is giving me the result sets. And this is my outer query or the main query on which my result is dependent. So when I run this, this is how it works. So this is how my inner query and a basic approach of subquery would be written with the same example which we saw on pen and paper. So as we have seen the simplistic approach of how a subquery works, let's try to understand what are the various types of subqueries which we can use, which we can write and generate the outcome for the same. So subqueries can be categorized into different types based on their structure and the number of rows they return. Now the main types include, first is a single row subquery. Now when a subquery returns one row, that's a single row subquery which is being called. So a single row subquery returns only one row as its result. It is commonly used with comparison operators like greater than, less than, equals to and not equals to, or it could be greater than, equals to and so on. Now multi-row subquery. What's a multi-row subquery? A multi-row subquery returns more than one row as its result. It is often used with operators like in, any and all which are there. Now there is a correlated subquery, slightly different from what we have understood with respect to subquery. We will see that how does a correlated subquery works. Correlated means the subquery is related. As of now, what we have studied that the subquery is independent, but when a correlated subquery comes, it becomes a dependent query over here. So a correlated subquery references column from outer table and it is executed once for each row processed by the outer query. This type of subquery depends on the outer query for its values. So it's dependent subquery, it's not the independent subquery which we have seen. So correlated subqueries are slightly different from whatever subqueries which we have studied so far. Let's try to understand them. Now, as we have seen a single row subquery, what does a single row subquery says? A single row subquery returns only one row as its result set. So it is going to return only one row for us. Now imagine, find the employees belonging to, let's say, sales department with a subquery. Now if you can see the question, that what they want over here, that they want an employee's result to be given which are belonging to sales department, where now you have to do it with the help of subquery. Now this is a question which is available into two tables, that is select star from employees. Now if I do select star from employees, you can see that I have employee ID, first name, last name, email, phone number, hiring date, job title. I have department ID instead of having department names. And then there is what? A salary which is being given. Now I want to know the department ID of the sales department. So let's say I'll do select star from, let's say there is a table known as departments. If I do this, you can see the sales department is D3. So when I want to find the employees belonging to sales department, definitely I can do it as select star from employees, where let's say department ID is equals to D3. So I'll get those as department employees details. So all the employees who are belonging to department D3 are being shown, that is they are from the sales department. But as I said, I don't want to be stick to static values or a fixed value when my query is being generated. I want to use a subquery over here. Now I can do the same thing with the help of joins in a more easier manner. But as it is said to us that we have to use a subquery, let's try to use a subquery over here. Now we will also understand the rules which were mentioned by us related to subqueries. Now what it is? First of all, let me go to the departments table. Select star from what? From departments, which are there. So I went into departments table. I want what? I want the data related to the sales department. So where I write where the name of the department is having a value equals to what? Sales. And here you can see which department is related to sales, the department D3. Now I want this department ID to be matching with the employees details table over here. So I will write something called as ID, that this ID I want to match with the department ID from my employees table. So here if you can see, this query I will be using into as a subquery that is within my table. So how am I going to use it is select star from employees where the department ID is equals to. Now equals to is used when you use single row subquery. Why? Because equals to, greater than, less than, I used to filter out the data based on one value. Now the subquery which I will be using over here is this, is returning me one value, that is the department ID as D3. And as it is said, subquery is what you have to write into a parenthesis. So according to the rule, I have written in parenthesis. Now it was also mentioned that your subquery cannot have multiple columns. Your subquery will have one column. If I write multiple columns, select star from departments where name is equals to sales. When I do this, you can see operand should contain one column. So that is operator should contain one column as an output. It is having multiple columns over here in order to filter out the data. So department ID should match with the ID of the department tables. So as per the rules, if you can see, what were the rules? The rules were your retrieval, just a second, yeah. What were the rules? Your main query does not have multiple columns, but your subquery should only have one column. It doesn't depend on main query that it has multiple columns or not, but your subquery should have one column. That's a mandate thing which is there. And as per the rule, I have written over here, that's one column. It is being used to match the data from the main query. So here you can see it is giving me data related to which department? Sales department. Now what is this query? This is a single row subquery. Why it is a single row subquery? Because when I take this inner query or my subquery and run it over here, it's returning me one value or one row. When your subquery returns one value or one row, it's a single row subquery. So this is what we have performed so far with respect to a single row subquery, and this is how it works. It uses equals to, greater than, less than, and so on. So this was a single row subquery where it returns only one row as its result. And the operators used are equals to, greater than, less than, as well as not less than equals to. So the query which we wrote earlier was also a single row query, because when I execute this subquery, it was returning me one row over here. Now let's say I want to find the employees from three departments. I want to find the employees. So I'll say find the employees from sales, HR, and let's say finance department. So I want to find employees from sales, HR, as well as finance. So how will I be able to find it out? Select star from departments. Let me see, do we have these departments or not? If you can see, I have HR, I have sales, I have IT. So when I say that where where the name is equals to sales or the name of the department. Now or, it can be either sales or HR or finance. So or, let's say I do HR, or I say the name of the department is what? Finance. And when I execute this, you can see my query is returning me 3 results. I want their IDs to be used over here. So when I use this, my query, which will be used as a subquery, is returning not one row, it is returning multiple rows for me. So when I write the subquery over here for this, I'll write select star from what? From employees, where, and I say department ID, which I want to match, and I do equals to over here, and I write this query as a subquery. So I write it and I execute it. It is showing me error. Now subquery returns more than one row. As you know, when I run this query, which is used as a subquery, how many rows it is returning? Multiple. So it's a multi-row subquery which is there. So for a multi-row subquery, we never use equals to. You all must be remembering, when I want to filter out multiple datas from one particular column, we studied an operator known as in. So in as an operator will help me to filter out multiple records from the data. So when I run this query over here, you can see the employees belonging to D1, D3 department which are there. So here a multi-row subquery has run. Multi-row subquery returns more than one row as its result. It is often used with operators such as in, any and all. So if used it with the help of what? In, because my subquery was returning more than one row for us. So this was a multi-row subquery. So as we saw, example related to how a single row query will generate an outcome for us, how it would be written, how a multi-row query will generate an outcome for us, and how it would be written. Let's try to create and let's try to solve certain problem and also understand what is this correlated subquery and how does it works. So find the details of the employee who have spent maximum hours on the project. So I want to find out the details of the employee who has spent some hours on the project, and that hours are what? The maximum number of hours which are there. So let me first see the data which is available to me. So definitely when a question comes to you, you have to break it down into parts. The first part is find the details of the employee who has spent maximum hours on the project. So I need what? I need the details of the employee. So the first table of consideration over here is nothing but the employees. So select star from what? From the employees which is there. So I'll select the employees data which is available to me, and this is the data where I have first name, last name, email, but there is nothing related to hours which has been worked upon by the individual. So let me see which table will have the information for the same. As I showed you that I had a company database where there are 4 tables. So first table is employees where I get the employee related information. So find the details of the employee who has spent maximum hours on the project. Let me see the projects table. Does it consist of anything related to the hours spent by the individual? So I'll do select star from what? From the projects table. So it will show me all the data related to the project. That is the name of the project, the description, the start date, end date, and the department which is working on this project. But definitely it is not giving me anything related to the hours. Let me see the timesheets table. I think so. There is the project related information on the basis of the hours spent by the individual. So if I do select star from timesheets, yes, you can see that there is hours related information from the same. Now what it is asking me? Find the details of the employee who has spent maximum hours on the project. I want to find out the maximum number of hours spent by the individual on the project, which is that employee. So let me first find what is the maximum number of hours spent over here. So in order to find the maximum hours, I'll do max, and I cannot write star, as you know that maximum would be calculated for a particular column. So which column I want to calculate it for? Hours. So maximum number of hours, you can see what are the maximum number of hours spent by the individual over here is 9.50. Now I want to find which is that employee who has spent 9.5 hours. So in order to find out that, what I will do over here is, let me see which employee is there. Select star from timesheets where hours. Now I'll see from timesheets which is the table. Hours is equals to the maximum number of hours. So this is my inner query, which is giving me one single result set. So it's a single row query result which is being generated, and this will be used by the outer query to give me the outcome. As I've said, a subquery needs to be mentioned into what? A parenthesis or a round bracket. When I execute it, when I run it, you can see 9.5 hours were spent by an individual where the employee ID is 112. So I want to find the details of the employee who is having 112 as an employee ID, which is there. So let us write a query for the same. So this entire query, I'll say that employee ID which I want to find is 112. So I'll go into my select. Now this entire thing is going to act as a subquery. Why? Because it is giving me the answer for the employee ID 112 who has spent maximum number of hours. So how I can do it is select star from employees. I've written select star from employees. I'll do where the ID of the employee is equals to, and I'll do that select. So if you can see, let me beautify my entire query. How to beautify? Select it, this one, I'll select this one, and I'll try to beautify it. So when I click on beautify, just a second, why it is not beautifying? Let me write it down correctly. Okay, this entire thing is a subquery for me. So I'll try to beautify over here. So what is happening? Let me talk upon this and let me help you to understand the working for the same. Now what is the question? Find the details of the employee. I want to find out the details of the employee who has spent. So who has spent what? Spent maximum hours on the project. I want that employee to be shown who has spent maximum hours on the project. Now what were the maximum hours which were spent on the project? If I run this query, I'll get what were the maximum hours spent on the project. It was just a second. It was 9.5. So what were the maximum hours spent on the project? 9.5. But I don't know which employee ID did spend those maximum number of hours. So I wrote a subquery which will show me the maximum number of hours spent by which employee, which is that employee who has done the same over here. So I'll run this query. It will show me which is that employee who has spent maximum number of hours over here. The employee ID 112 is the employee who has spent maximum number of hours. I want to find the details of that employee over here. So select star from employee over here. You can see the main query is this. The main query is this. My subquery is this. So if I show you with respect to the details, let me talk upon the details over here. Okay, if I show you that this is a data which was there, let me hide this. So this entire thing, select star from employees. That's my main query. What it is? It's my main query. And here this thing is my subquery. Or the nested query. What is the meaning of nested? That is within. So a nested query which is there, or I can call it as an inner part, or the inner query which is being executed, and this is my outer query which is being executed. So if you can see the data, my data is dependent on the outcome of this to find out which is that employee who has spent maximum number of hours. Now it's not mandated that your inner query will only have one query. As you can see, my inner query has two queries mentioned over here. That is, first it will calculate maximum, then it will give me the ID of the employee who has spent maximum number of hours, and then it will go to the outer query to generate the results set. So inner query results will be used by the outer query to generate the result set which is there, and this is what it is known as the data. And this subquery is known as independent. As I showed you, running those queries independently, when I run those queries separately, is it giving me the answer? Yes. So independently executing. So this is an independent outcome which is there, and this is how your subqueries are working, which we have understood. It is also a single row subquery because each subquery over here is returning one single result set or one single record which will be used by you to execute or generate the outcome. So I hope we are clear with the same over here and how multiple subqueries will be used in order to generate the result set. So this was the answer for the first question. So which is that employee who has spent maximum number of hours on the project? The employee name is Abhishek Patil, and he is having a job title as senior analyst belonging to department D5 and having a salary as 75,000. So this is how we have used the subquery over here. Now find those employees who have altogether spent more than average hours. Now what is the meaning of this? Just understand the question over here. Find those employees who have altogether spent. Find those employees who have altogether spent more than average hours. Now I want to find how many total hours were spent by the individual and which individual spent more than the average hours given over here. Now how will I do it? First of all, let's try to solve the question over here. It is asking me the data related to the hours spent. Let us first go to the employees table. As you know that it is related to employees. So when I go to employees table, it has information, but it doesn't have anything related to the hours spent. Now if I do select star from timesheets, if you know that timesheets is a data which has related to the hours spent, you can see each employee on a different day has spent different number of hours. I want to find all together hours spent. Now how will I do it? You all must be knowing that we have something called as group by, which will tell me the total number of hours spent by the individual. So what I am doing, select star from timesheets. If you can see, it's there. I will write a query. You all know I will be doing what? Group by. I will be grouping the results. So I will be creating aggregated data. So I'll do where from what? Timesheets, which is there, and I don't want to do, I want to group the data. So I want to group the data on the basis of what? On the basis of employee ID. So I'll say that I want to group the data with respect to employee ID. as I've discussed when we studied group by. The column which is used in group by, the same column would be a part of my select. So I do employee ID, which is there, and what I want. It shows me the IDs which are there, but what I want the total number of hours spent by them. So I do sum of what? Hours, as, let's say, I'll write a column name. What it is? Total hours. So I write the same. So what was the altogether total hours spent by the individual? What is the total hours spent by them? That is what? Employee ID and total number of hours. 101 as an employee has spent around 29 hours working on the project altogether. 102 has spent around what? 34. 103, 104, 105 and so on would be used. Now I want to find out what the average of total hours. How will I find out? Do you think so that if, let's say, I do having total hours greater than the average hours, average total hours, if I do total hours is greater than the average total hours, it's invalid. Now you cannot filter it in this manner into your having clause as well. Your total hours is already an aggregated function, and your value which you want to spend over here cannot be this. Cannot be this. I want to find out which employee has spent more than total hours altogether. I cannot find it in this way. That's incorrect, because total hours is already an aggregated function. I cannot do greater than this over here. So that needs to be more filtered out. That needs to be more enhanced over here, and let's see how it works. So I cannot use having in order to filter it out. So I want to use the result generated by this query to find out the average of total hours. I cannot use it directly. I cannot write select average hours from and directly a table name. Why? Because this query is not stored anywhere. This query is just simply there with me. So I want to generate an outcome based on the grouped table which is stored nowhere. So I will show you an approach of writing a subquery into my group by. How? Or into my from. How? If I write select average of what? Of total hours, which is there. So total hours, and from where I want to find out this total hours. Now there is no table. The query result which I generated from group by, I want to use it as a table. So I will mention this entire thing as my subquery. This entire thing will be used as a subquery. But when I run this statement, you can see it will show me an error. What's an error? Every derived table must have its own alias. Now from, we write a table name instead of writing a query. So the query which is being written, it's not a table which is there. I want to write a name of the table over here. So this query will represent, so I'll give an alias. This alias is what? Hours. So the table name is hours, which I have given. Hours spent. Let's say I give hours spent as a name. And when I run this, it will give me the average number of hours altogether spent. What is the data related to that? So average number of hours which are spent over here. So you can see that what are the average number of altogether hours which are spent? That is 30.25. If I just find the average over here, select average of what? Hours. From timesheets, it's 5 average hours. So it's an individual. But the average hours which are generated now is related to the total hours altogether which are spent. So this is how we can get the average hours. Now what is the question? Find those employees who have, what is the ask of the question? Find those employees who have altogether spent more than average hours. So I will use the average which is generated by this query. So I'll write the same query over here. Select by employee ID. See, so I'm writing it over here. That is, select employee ID, sum of hours as total hours from timesheet, group by employee ID, and I'll write what? Having what? The total hours. Total hours greater than. So here you can see it is showing me the employee who has spent greater than what? Average number of total hours altogether. The average number of total hours altogether were 30 point something, and it is showing me those employees who have spent more than average number of hours. Now if I want to find employee details, you can modify it further, that you can only get the employee IDs over here, and the employee IDs which you get, just a second, yeah, it's a having part. So I can still modify, or I can use it as a table and then get it sorted as just say total hours which are there over here. And after this I can write a join statement to get the employee details over here, so that I get those employee details, the employee names as well as their IDs which are being used. So let me join. So I'll do in a join what? Employee details. If I want employee details, I'll write employees as E, timesheets as T. So let me join on E.id is equals to T.employee ID. And so if I want details related to the employees which are there, so when I run this, it will show me first name, last name as well as the total hours spent by the individual. So in the group by, I can write the first name, the last name, and the columns which are there into my group by, the same columns would be a part of my select. So I'll write first name and then I'll write last name, you can see comma, and I'll do sum of hours. So this is an employee who has spent more than how much? 30 hours. That is an average of altogether hours. Now how this query has formulated, let me help you understand the same. I know it's complicated. Subqueries can add a lot of complexity to your outcome, but it ideally helps you to solve all the complicated logics which are there. The question was not complicated, but the answer became complicated when we tried solving it. Now what was the question? Find those employees who have altogether spent more than average hours. So first of all, I went into finding out the altogether hours over here. So this query is giving me the total hours spent by each employee. Now I wanted to find an average of this total hours. I cannot do it directly because this is not an actual table. This is a group table which is being generated. So in order to find the average of this, but this is not an actual table, I have written the subquery into from. So the result of this query will be used as a table. So from, we know the table name, but I didn't have a table name, so I have written the query. But whenever in from you write a query, you have to give them aliasing, because a table name needs to be there. So what's a table name? Hours spent. So this query is represented as hours spent. So I want to calculate the average total hours spent by each employee over here. So if I run this query, it will give me what as a total altogether average hours spent. It's 30.25. So it is giving us the outcome over here. Now I want to find the details of that employee who has spent all of this hours. So I have selected two tables. First is the employees and the timesheets. I've joined it and I've grouped the data on the basis of employee ID, first name and last name. So it will give me the employee ID, the first name, the last name, the employee consists of, the total hours which are spent by them, and I am calculating what? I'm calculating the total hours which are greater than what the average total hours over here. So this is how we can get the result set, and this is how the result is generated related to the employees who have spent more than average number of total hours altogether. So as you saw that we have solved some questions, so let's proceed with the next question which is being asked, and we will solve it with the help of subquery. Now what is the next question which is the ask over here? Find those projects which are available in the timesheets table. Now obviously I have data related to the projects, I have data related to the timesheets. Now let me show both the tables for you. Select star from projects. Now projects table consists of what all projects were given to the organization or for the company to work upon. So you can see there are 6 projects in total named as P1, P2, P3 and so on. And there are certain names of the project, their description, start date and end date, that when the project actually started and when it actually ended, and then we have the departments working on those projects. Now what I wanted over here, I want to know which projects are available in timesheets. Now definitely these are the projects which are given, but not all projects information or not all projects working hour are being traced into timesheets table. Let me see. Select star from which table I want? Timesheets. So let me see. Now in the timesheets table, yes, we definitely have project ID over here. Let me see which project do I have. So projects ID. So what all projects do I have? Now multiple records are coming. I want to show the unique project IDs available into the timesheets table. Now what should I do is I should do distinct. Distinct what? Distinct project ID over here. And when I execute it, you can see that P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5 is not there. We had a P5 project over here. If you see the projects table, that we had a P5 project which is attendance regularization, and in the timesheets the data related to P5 project is not there. We had 6 projects in total and 5 projects data is available. Now find those projects. Now understand the question over here. Find those projects which are available in timesheets table. Now I wanted to know only those project names which are available into timesheets. I can definitely do this question with the help of a joins which we have studied. But let's try to utilize it with the help of subquery, and let's see how does the subquery works. So over here, the project IDs which are available into my timesheets table, I want this IDs to be matching to the projects table and those project information should be given to me. So I will use this query where the IDs of the projects available in timesheets as my subquery, that is my inner query, which will help me to get results for the outer query, that is the project names which are there. So if I do select star from projects, that's the query, and I'll write a where condition. Where what? Where if you see the ID from the projects table should match the ID of the project ID table from the project ID column from the timesheets. So I'll write ID and I'll write equals to. In this equals to, I'll write this query. I'll write this query which gives me those project IDs. So I'll copy this query over here. And as you know that subqueries are always written within parentheses. So I have written it within the parentheses which are there, and this will definitely give me error because it's a multi-row subquery. What is the meaning of a multi-row subquery? My inner query is resulting multiple records, not one records. So I'll write an operator known as in to match the data based on multiple records. And when I run this, can you see the outcome over here? Now let me, so here can you see the project IDs which are there. So we have got P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5. P5 is not there. P4 and P6. P5 is not there because P5 related information was not available into timesheets. So the question was find those projects which are available in timesheets. So these are the 5 project details which are available into the timesheets table. So here you can see my subquery over here is this, which is returning the distinct project IDs from the timesheets, and those project IDs are used by the outer query to find out the names of those projects from the projects table. So this was a subquery which we solve over here, and this is the data, this is the outcome which it is giving. So based on the questions which we solved so far, the subqueries which we used over here, we solved a lot of questions over here. So the subquery was independent in nature. What is the meaning of that? Independent in nature, which means if I run this query, if I execute this query separately, it is going to execute for me and it is not showing me any errors over here. But if you remember that in the types of subquery, we also had something called as correlated subquery. Now, what is the meaning of correlated? Correlated means a related subquery. A subquery will have relation, or I can call it as a dependency. Now, as I was telling you that subquery is independent in nature. How come a subquery can become dependent? Or it can be dependent on the outer query which is there. Let's try to understand it over here. So, a correlated subquery references columns from the outer query. So, it takes data from the outer query, and that's why it becomes dependent on the outer query and is executed once for each row processed by the outer query. Now, what does it mean? Let me tell you with a simplistic example for the same. Now, this type of subquery depends on the outer query for its value, which means this subquery is not independent in nature. It is dependent in nature. So far, if I take the example of the last query we wrote, if I need to write for the same, just a second. Yeah. So, this part is known as my inner query. This part was known as what? My inner query. Also was known as more the subquery which was there, and this was independent in nature. Now what is the meaning of that? Independent in nature, which means if I run this query separately, I can get the answer of the query which is there. And this was my outer query. I can also call it as a dependent query. Why a dependent query over here? Because this query was dependent on the inner query result which was there, and that was also known as my main query, because this is a main query which gives me the result sets or the outcome over here. Now in this, my inner query was executing only once. Now what does it mean? That when I run this statement or this query which I have written, the inner query will execute once, and the answers or the outcomes of the inner query will be used by the outer query. The inner query is not going to execute n number of times for each row of the outer query. It is going to be executed only once. But there will be certain correlated query which will show correlation between inner query and the outer query. So, the major difference between an correlated and the so far studied queries which we know is non-correlated. Subquery, this executes multiple number of times. Means if you have 10,000 outcomes in the outer query, it will execute 10,000 times. If you have 500 outcomes in the outer query, it will execute 500 times. So for every outcome, for every row of the outer query, the inner query is going to execute. And non-correlated subquery is something which executes only once. That's the simplistic difference over here. Now the subquery, query within a query is known as subquery. The subquery over here is also known as dependent. So subquery is dependent. What is the meaning of that? That this query is going to be dependent on the outer query. But so far we have studied that subqueries are independent. So far we have studied that subqueries are what? Are independent in nature. So there are special cases when this correlated subquery is used. Sometimes it can be computationally heavy and sometimes it can help us or it can consume a lot time to generate the outcomes which are there. So it's not always preferred approach, but let's try to understand correlated subqueries with the help of two examples which I have over here. Now imagine the question, fetch employees who earn more than average of their departments. Fetch employees who earn more than their department's average salary. Now imagine I have employees table over here and this table has a lot of information. What kind of information it has? It has employee ID which is there. It had employee name which is there. Let's say they have employee salary over here and we have something called as department over here. I want to know now employee ID 101, 102, 103, 104 and 105 is the employee's details. Let's say name is A, B, and C. So we have the names of the employee. Let's say the salary over here is 3K, 4K. Just a second. Yeah. 3K, 4K. Now K over here is 1000. So 3K, 4K, or let's not write 3K and 4K, I'll write thousands to avoid the confusion over here. So let me write it as 3000, 4000, let's say 6000 over here, 5,000 and 4,500. A random salary, and let's say I write the department as admin, HR. Then here again this is admin, HR, and then this is what? Finance, which is there. Now what's my question? Fetch employees who earn more than their department's average salary. Now when my query goes and helps to find out the question for the same, let's say it goes with first record over here. Now first of all I need the average salary of each department. So here let's say department I made and here I make the average salary. So what's the department name? Let's say I have department as admin, HR and finance. And I have the average salary for admin, 3,000 and 6,000. 3,000 and 6,000, 9,000. 9,000 divided by 2 would be nothing but 4,500. Let's say I have 4,000 over here and 5,000 over here. Again I have 9,000, so it's 4,500 and finance department had that only. So let me write 4,500 over here. Now I wanted to know which employee is having, fetch employees who earn more than their department's average salary. So which employee is having 4500 with respect to admin, then with respect to HR, with respect to what? Finance. So when I go with the first row over here, first row 101, then A 3000 with respect to admin. So it will go and run this query. This query will be executed. This will be my inner query result, and it will check the salary. Now definitely this is not correct. So this will not be fetched. Now it went into the next record, that is HR. And over here is what? HR salary is greater than 4500. So this query will be executed again. The average salary of the department will be calculated again. And this row will be compared now with this. This is not there. So this will also be not executed. Now it will go to 103 where admin. It will execute the inner query again for this particular column or this particular row. 4500 is the salary, average salary of admin now they have got, and 6000 is definitely greater than that, so this will be selected into the outcome. Now for the next employee, this inner query will execute again, the average salaries would be populated again. So here 5000 which is there. Now 5000 is definitely greater than 4500, so this will be executed. Now 105, see 4500, you can see it's not greater than, it's just equals to, so this will not be executed. So which two employees have salaries greater than their department's average salary? It's the employee number 103 and 104. But over here for each row check, the inner query was executed that number of times. So I had 5 rows in the outcomes in the outer query to be checked. So inner query will be executed 5 number of times. So that is the simplistic difference between the non-correlated, which we have studied so far, and the correlated subquery. Now let's try to write the same thing with a code, and let me show how does a correlated subquery looks like. So when I go over here and when I do select star from, let's say, employees, which I have. So we had employees table. Here you can see all the employees which are there, and I wanted to know the department wise average salaries over here, but I don't know which employee is earning more than their department's average salary. I want to find out the department's average salary. Let me do it over here. So I'll create group of what? Department IDs, and I'll find out what? Average salary, which was there over here, and then I'll do what? Group by with respect to what? The department IDs which were there. When I execute, you can see this is being shown over here: D1, D2, D3, D4, D5 and D6, D7, nothing is there. So there is an empty. With respect to that, their average salary is what? 0 over here. So here you can see this is a data. Now for D1, those employees are having salaries greater than 40,000 would be fetched. For D2, those employees having salary greater than 30,000 would be fetched. For D3, greater than 57, greater than 66, and then over here greater than 35, that will be fetched. So in order to run this query, first of all, what do I want in the outcome? I want the employee details in the outcome. So my main query will be select star from employees. Now definitely the same table I'll be using in my inner query over here. So I'll name it as a table known as outer, or let's say I'll write outer table over here. And where I want to compare their salaries, so I'll compare what? Salaries over here should be greater than. So fetch employees who have more than their department's average salary. So I'll do this. Now here, can you see this? I'm writing a subquery, but the subquery is slightly different. So I'll do select average what? Salary, because salary, the average salary from the inner query will be used by the outer query over here. Salary from which table? From employees. From employees, and I'll write a condition where employees dot department ID. So the department IDs of employees should ideally match with the outer table dot what department IDs which are there, and I want what? I want the group by result with respect to the department IDs. So I'll create department IDs group by, and these are the two employees who are having salaries greater than the department's average salary. Now what is happening over here and how this query is different from what we have studied so far? Just observe this very carefully, that what I have written. So this entire thing over here is my inner query. This entire thing is my inner query, and this query over here is dependent. Why do I call this query dependent? The meaning of correlation means a dependency or a relation. So the queries have relation. The dependency over here is this. Can you see the table which I had in the main query? I'm using it into my inner query. In a correlated subquery, I can do this. Now, how do we examine that it's a correlated subquery with this? Where the outer query or the main query table is used within the inner query. That's a correlated subquery. Non-correlated subquery will never do this. So the outer query table is used within what? Within the inner query to generate the result set over here. So that shows a correlation or a dependency which was not shown earlier so far. You cannot use this employees table directly over here because you have main query as one table. So this is what? This is my main query. Which is there. So earlier the inner query used to execute only once and the outer query was supposed to be generating the outcome. But here what it had done, select average salary from employees where employees dot department is equals to outer table dot department ID group by department, it has done. So if I show you here, this is the data, and let me run both the queries. Select star from employees. I'll show you how this query has actually worked. I'll take both this query. I want both the outcomes to be there. So I'll run this. So you can see two outcomes. This is the average and this is the employee table. So first the inner query executed. The inner query executed. Now average salary from employees where employees dot department ID is equals to outer table department ID group by department IDs. So what is the first table department? D5 over here. What's the department over here? It's D5. So D5's average salary is computed. So this query will give me D5's average salary. What is D5's average salary? 75,000. And what it will do? It will compare it over here. Is the salary greater than 75,000? No. So this will not be shown in the outcome. This is done. Now for the next result over here, what it will done? It will run the inner query again. Now what's the department over here? D1. What is the salary? 40,000, but I don't want to see this. D1 So employees.department ID, that is this, and outer table.department ID is this. So D1 would be shown. So what is the D1's average salary? 40,000. Is this employee's salary greater than 40,000? No. So this will not be calculated. Now it goes to the third data. It will see the department as D3. What is the average salary of department D3? 57,000. What is the salary over here? 55,000, which is definitely less than, so this will not be shown in the outcome. If you go with the department over here for fourth record, the inner query will execute again. What is the department D3? It will calculate the D3's average salary, 57,000. And it's again 55,000, so it will not be shown in the outcome. So same happens for the D5, D6. So how many times the inner query is going to execute? 130 times. Not 130 times. Let me see how many employees do I have. I have 130 as in last ID. So how many employees do I have? I have 21 employees. So my inner query is going to execute 21 number of times to compare with the outer query. And there is a relation made that the IDs of the outer table and the inner table will be compared, and that will be used to generate a result set. So every time the outer query record is there, it will be searched by the inner query executed that number of times, and that is the meaning of correlation. So the inner query seems to be correlated or dependent on the outer query to generate the outcome for me. So this was a correlated subquery. Over here, let me show one more example related to correlated subquery for you so that you'll get it more clear. Now, find departments without any employees. I want to know which department doesn't have any employees working in it. Let me see. Select star from departments. So I'll see this. I have D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, D6 and so on. Now if I do select star from employees, which are there. So here you can see D1, D2, D3. I want to know, okay, which departments the employees are working and which is the department where the employees are not working over here. So department IDs, and I'll write distinct because it will show me the distinct and not the repeated elements. So D1, D2, D3, D4 and D5 are the departments in the employees table where it is there. Now let me see, D6 and D7 is not there. So find which departments without any employees. Which are the departments where there are no employees working in it? D7 and D6 over here. So that I wanted to find with the help of subquery over here. So how will I find it? First, let me write select. I want the department IDs. Let's say I'll write select star from what? From departments, and I'll write where ID is equals to or in, because my inner query will give me multiple results. So I'll write in select department ID from employees which are there, and I'll write where. Now employees, what should match from employees table? The department ID, and the outer query will be related. It's a correlated subquery. The table, the outer query table will be used over here. So which table is it? Departments. So can I use it? Yes, departments.id, which is there. So when I run this query, it is giving me the department names where there are employees working in it. I want to know which department has no employees working in it, which means where there are no employees still yet hired by the organization. So instead of in, I'll write not in. You all must be knowing that it will not consider the values shown which are matching, it will show which are not matching over here. So D6 and D7, we saw over here that the employees working were in D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. D6 and D7 was the department where there were no employees working. And with this query, we got it very clear. So for every record over here, it will go to every record in the outcome and it will try to do a match over here, which is there. So if I show you what it will do, I'll run both the queries. So departments, so this is a departments table and this is my inner query which I have used. So what it is showing me, the first record is D1 over here. Is D1 found in my inner query? Yes, D1 is found. So I am writing not in. I don't want it because it should not be found. So the second record is this. My inner query will execute again. D2. Is D2 found over here? Yes, the D2 is found. So it will not be shown in the outcome. D3. Yes, the D3 is found. The inner query executes again and D3 is found. So it will not be shown. D4. Yes, the inner query is executed and D4 is found again. It will not be shown. D5 which is there and the inner query executes again and D5 is found, so it will not be shown. Now D6, yes, for D6 inner query executes and D6 is not found, so it's not in the list which is given by the subquery. So definitely this is the department where the employee is not working. For D7, it will run the inner query again. Is D7 available? No, it's not available, and it will give me the result set or the outcome stating that D6 and D7 are those departments where there are no employees working in it. Now many people, what they do, instead of writing this, it will write exist. Now exist is a subquery or exist is a statement which will help me to return an outcome if the values are matching, if the subquery results an outcome over here for me. So these are the department which exist between both the tables supported by the inner query relation. Now if I write not exist, so it will show me which doesn't exist between both of them. So which are the two departments which doesn't exist between both of them? It's D6 and D7. So this is how a correlated subquery was slightly different from the non-correlated subqueries or the basic subqueries like single row and multi-row which we studied. They are mostly known as nested subqueries which are there or non-correlated subquery. Now this was just a practical implementation for both of them. I hope you are clear with this, but let's try to see with some differences between both of them over here. So we understood that when to use subqueries, how to use subqueries practically. Let me show you over here that what is the difference between a correlated and a non-correlated subquery. Now if I want to talk upon a feature of execution, as I said, correlated subquery will execute once per outer row, which means the number of times the outer rows are available, the correlated subquery or the inner subquery will execute that number of times. So imagine we have 10 outcomes in the outer query, so the inner query is going to execute 10 number of times for each row. It will be computed. Now when I talk upon a non-correlated subquery, it will be executed only once. That is, if I want to find the average salary greater than average, so it will execute once, it will give me average and it will be computed by the outer query to generate the result set. Now dependency can reference outer query column. Correlated subquery can take outer query table and outer query column to show relation, as we have seen. Now non-correlated subquery cannot reference outer query columns. It cannot do it. It cannot use outer query information over here. The meaning of correlation lies over here. That it relates with the outer query, it does not relate with the outer query. Performance may be less efficient for large data set. Now when you have a large data set, let's say I have 1 lakh of records. For 1 lakh of records, 1 lakh time the inner query is going to execute, and that can be computationally heavy. So certain of the times people preferably don't use correlated subqueries. Instead they prefer to use joins or unions to perform this task very efficiently. Now generally more efficient because the query is executing, the inner query is executing only once, so it's not that efficient that it has to run n number of times. So it becomes more efficient for us and not so much computationally heavy as compared to a correlated subquery. Now use case. Results depend on outer query values. So the inner query results are going to be dependent on the outer query for me. Results are independent on the outer query, which means the inner query over here is independent in nature, and the inner query over here is dependent in nature. You all have seen that over here. So if I show you that this shows dependency. Why dependency? Because outer query table is being used over here, but this shows independency. Nothing from the outer query is used over here. So the inner query over here is independent, but the inner query over here is what is dependent in nature. That's what we can see over here with respect to the subqueries which are there. So that was a major difference between a nested or non-correlated subquery and a correlated subquery. You will usually see a non-correlated subquery used a lot as compared to a correlated subquery, just because correlated subqueries can be certain times computationally heavy. So they are used when you have less number of data in the outer query or less number of data into your inner query which are there. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of using a subquery? Advantages: simplicity. Now subqueries can make complex queries easier to read because it's a query within a query, so I can execute one query and get the outcome for the same. Just like what we did in the question where we have to calculate the employees where we have more than average hours. It was a lot of queries, it was a lot of complications. But if I run one query at a time, I can understand what is happening within it. So it can help me to understand the simplicity within the complex queries which are there. So subqueries can make complex queries easier to read and understand by breaking them into smaller parts. Modularity. Subqueries can be reused and modified without affecting the outer query. Yes, my inner query I can modify according to the convenience, according to the requirement, where I don't need to modify the outer query, but inner query can modify it and get the result set over here. Now flexibility. Subqueries provide a way to retrieve data without the need of joins. So without even joining two tables, I can definitely get the results from two tables over here. That is what a flexibility feature of a subquery is. Now obviously the things which comes with advantages will have certain disadvantages which are there. Now disadvantages of subqueries. Performance. Subqueries can be less efficient than joins, especially in large dataset, as they may execute multiple number of times. Your correlated subqueries, when you have 10,000 records, the inner query is going to execute 10,000 times. It can be computationally heavy and it can be less efficient as compared to joins. At that particular time, joins will be more preferable for us. Complexity. Correlated subqueries can become complex and difficult to optimize. Now, when you add multiple correlations between the subqueries, it will be more complex in nature, and that can lead to confusion within the queries and the outcomes, and it can become difficult to manage because it becomes heavy and computationally inefficient over there. So, these were certain disadvantages of a subquery. So here we have completed what is subquery, Why do we use subquery? What are the simplistic example of using subquery? The types of subqueries which we understood. We saw practical implementation of what does a correlated and non-correlated subquery look like. We understood what is a major difference between both of them and what are several advantages and disadvantages of the same. I hope you all have understood what is a subquery and why do we use a subquery and how come subquery can help me to get certain result sets without joining two tables or without doing any of the complex tasks. But yes, the subqueries can get complex when you try to add multiple queries within them. So this was all about subqueries. I hope you have understood the same.